At the Tax Forum today in Canberra, there was unlikely consensus on an unexpected issue. Experts from business and welfare groups all agreed that the unemployment benefit, or New Start allowance, is too low. They say it's penalising the jobless, making it harder for people to get work and condemning the long-term unemployed to poverty. Actually, it was a day for unexpected views at the forum. One of Australia's top investment bankers called on the government to take more tax from the rich. From Canberra, here's Stephen Long.
I'm 62 years old, difficult to go work because I don't talk English very well. Difficult.
Maria Lewis migrated to Australia with her husband Jose in 1976. She cared for him through illness for 15 years until he died during Easter this year. Now she's being forced off the carers payment and onto the dole, or New Start allowance. It's $200 less a fortnight, and despite her age, her language difficulties and a knee injury, she's going to have to hunt for work. And she's one of many. Even in these booming economic times, there's a sizable army of unemployed workers living on a meagre stipend.
We've got right now over 600,000 people who cannot get paid work, and they're living on the social security payment called New Start. That's just $34 a day and hasn't been increased for over 2 decades. That's in the same year that we've got senior executives getting 12% increases in their very, very expensive remuneration packages. So the balance isn't right. I think the public knows it's not looking fair in terms of who's gaining out of the pretty good economy overall and who is not, and this is the opportunity through the tax and transfer system to fix that.
It's a poverty level payment for people who are unemployed. It's not sustainable, and I think there was general agreement at the Tax Forum that it has to increase.
What kind of people are on the New Start allowance?
Well, the people we see are often older workers. 1 in 3 people on the New Start allowance is over 45. We also see a lot of people trying to juggle casual work because they can't get permanent full-time employment. 265,000 of the 545,000 people on New Start allowance have some level of disability, and these people are trying to live on $240 per week.
Is it just New Start that people feel is inadequate?
And there was indeed an extraordinary consensus at the Tax Forum, on the left and the right, that at least for the long-term jobless, the unemployment benefit is too low. And some of the comments would have been the last thing the government expected.
I do think that issue about the gap between the New Start allowance and the other pensions is an enormous one.
Professor Judith Sloan said the low payments hit older workers hard, as they're unemployed for 3 times longer than the average.
I mean, we have to understand that the dole unemployment benefits New Start was there as a short-term transitional payment. But if people are unemployed for a long period of time, the issue of adequacy really becomes important, and indeed their ability to successfully find employment becomes important, and there is going to have to be something done.
Let's put those views in context. Professor Sloan's no bleeding heart. She's a prominent libertarian economist, free market leaning, drier than dry, a champion of labour market deregulation. So if she's saying the New Start allowance is inadequate, demeaning and doesn't help people get back to work, sit up and listen. Comrade Jeff Lawrence, president of the ACTU, was amazed by his unlikely bedfellow.
I didn't think I'd ever agree with Judith Sloan about anything.
Marie O'Halloran is president of the National Welfare Rights Network, which gives free legal aid to people on Centrelink payments.
Well, the people we see are often older workers. 1 in 3 people on the New Start allowance is over 45. 265,000 of the 545,000 people on New Start allowance have some level of disability, and these people are trying to live on $240 per week.
Not enough for decent clothes, transport and the tools they need to get a job. But the budget's in deficit, and how's the government going to pay for an increase in the jobless benefit? One of Australia's top investment bankers had an idea: tax the rich.
The number of individual winners in Australia is shrinking all the time. the economic rents of capitalism are shrinking to a smaller and smaller group of people. And unless those people are willing to stand up and say, we will shoulder some of the societal responsibility, we will be facing the sort of nightmare that Europe and the US has at the moment. We are very, very lucky as a country. The richer of us are very, very lucky, and we need to stand up and take responsibility.
Mark Carnegie has run a boutique bank and a private equity firm. He says the well-off, who've gained most from the boom times, should be paying more to fund the costs of an ageing population.
I think that the people who have generated nearly $700 billion of household net worth over the last several years should be shouldering a disproportionate amount of that burden at the moment.
Why do you think governments aren't willing to put up the unemployment benefit or Newstart?
I think governments are afraid that there will be a backlash against that. I think they're afraid that people will think it's the wrong thing to do. But the people we see looking for work are people who are over 45, they're people trying to do casual work. I think that political leadership is needed to go out to the community and say, we can't have this poverty level of payment. It's not helping people get into work, and it's not helping our society. It's excluding people.
Never 100%.
Back at Maria Lewis's home at Dulwich Hill in Sydney, the burden of having her benefit cut to the jobless rate is too much.
Too hard, yeah. Too hard. It's hard to cut. Yeah.
And the summits keep rolling in Canberra. Tomorrow there's a jobs forum to look at what the government can do to generate more employment opportunities in Australia.